Good afternoon. I'm Devin Bartolotta along with Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin. Welcome to a Tracking the Tropics special here on WWL Plus. And we want to get out there right away.
Yes.
What we're seeing right now is nothing to write home about yet.
No, not at all, and may never be. And you were just asking, wait, are we tracking something, or
Yeah.
are we watching something? And I said, no, we're actually not watching anything. There really isn't anything to track per se, but it's an area that we could see try and develop in the next several days in the Gulf, but the models have not been very aggressive and continue to be kind of non-aggressive with this system.
Peyton called this on Twitter today the pumpkin in the Gulf.
It is a pumpkin in the Gulf.
It is a pumpkin in the Gulf.
And sometimes it may be kind of confusing with this graphic and what it means. What that is showing is that this is the area of where something could develop. It is not highlighting a track. This isn't a cone. This is not circling the area that we are currently watching in terms of storms. What it is the region where something may try and move into or develop in the coming days. And this is the 7-day forecast. Just as of the last couple of seasons ago, the forecast for these potential areas of development only went out 5 days. So the Hurricane Center made them 7 days, with the caveat that, you know, our models are only so good so far out. So 7-day forecasts are a little less reliable.
So far out, we're picking up a little bit of unrest.
Yes, a little unrest. The models are sniffing something out. They've got their little sniffers on, and they've been sniffing out something. And they have been for the last several days, although the models continue to not really indicate anything strong. I mean, right now, they're not really indicating even a depression or a storm organizing.
So everybody, obviously, on the heels of Francine is very anxious about the rest of this hurricane season because this has been so devastating to so many millions of people. So how ease our anxieties here. What are we looking at realistically? What are the chances that this is going to impact us here in Southeast Louisiana?
Not very likely. The way things have been trending based on the models, and I'm talking about the model runs even as of today, they have been very consistent in really not organizing this into a name storm, or if we were to see any kind of organization, maybe a depression. This is not one of those where all possibilities are on the table, kind of like they were with Helene. This is not one of those scenarios. This is kind of the only possible outcomes right now would be maybe a depression or a storm. But if that were to happen, it would be very unorganized. It would probably just be a big rainmaker, and it would more likely than not stay well off of the Louisiana coastline.
That is a relief.
Yes.
It does seem a little bit, maybe I'm wrong, it does seem a little late in the season to still be talking about these areas. Is that true?
Not really. I've always said kind of the rule of thumb for Southeast Louisiana in particular, but really for the entire Atlantic Basin is August 15th to October 15th is really the heart of the season. After we get past the 15th in Louisiana, that's when we can start to breathe that sigh of relief that we're not going to see the evacuation type storms. Could still easily see a storm, but not one that is going to cause mass evacuation. So we're only a couple of weeks away, and the way the models have been trending, I think we're probably looking good for the rest of our season. And again, people will mention, what about Zeta? Zeta was in that extreme season where all bets were off.
The rules didn't
matter. There were no rules.
2020 was something else.
It was Thunderdome.
Yes.
And, you know, you could kind of throw the rule book out because that was just a wild season. And even with that being said, Zeta wasn't necessarily a storm that you would have seen mass evacuations for. While it was a 3, it was moving so quickly, the impacts really weren't that of a Category 3 storm moving right over the city of New Orleans.
Can we talk a little bit about the greater Atlantic? Is there anything else going on outside of the Gulf?
Yes, we do have 2 other areas. Hurricane Kirk, which is actually on its way to likely becoming a major hurricane. Thankfully, as you can kind of see the long-term track of that, it is going to stay out over the open Atlantic waters. And we did have developed this morning tropical depression 13, once named, that would be Leslie. Notice the track of that as well. It's going to basically follow on the heels of Kirk. So the next named 2 storms, or the next named storm and the current active storm, are going to remain out over open water. These are not going to impact land at all, thankfully. So we'll kind of turn our interest to home. And one thing that I was highlighting yesterday was that the day before, so today's Wednesday?
I think.
So Monday, the Hurricane Center had an X on this graphic. So what we're showing is active storms and areas of potential development on this kind of tracking the tropics graphic. And so we're looking at areas that are active currently or could become active. And when they have that X, either a yellow orange or red, meaning low, medium, or high chance of development. That means the X is the area of storms that we're currently watching that the models are picking up on developing. Yesterday, the Hurricane Center removed that X. So what they're basically saying is that there isn't a particular cluster of storms right now that we're watching or waiting to see develop. It's just a area that something could move into it and try and develop. And the models have been having a tough time on figuring out exactly where that something may come from. For a little while, they were picking up on a feature coming out of the Caribbean into the Gulf. And then recent model runs, they've started to pick up on maybe something a little closer to home, Bay of Campeche. But they're still saying basically the same thing. Whatever does get into the Gulf, it's kind of just a big, broad rainmaker. Maybe brings us a chance for some rain. Not really the tropical system, but we'll start to see some rainfall tomorrow, Friday, and into Saturday. And then by Monday, we have a cold front moving in. And so we actually have several factors that are working in our favor with regards to anything that tries to develop in the Gulf.
Can we talk about the differences between what you're seeing here and what Helene was looking like at this stage in the game when the models were starting to sniff that out?
Helene was one of those where we already had, well, actually in the early stages, because these forecasts go out so far in advance, it was kind of the same thing. We just had this highlighted region, and there wasn't a storm that we were particularly interested in. It was going to be a developing storm, but the models had always honed in on this being, in the early stages, either a Florida kind of moving north or continuing off to the west. And it looked like if it was going to be a stronger storm, it would probably get pulled and brought up toward Florida, and that's exactly what happened. So even in the early stages, before there was an area to track, the models had kind of been in two camps, and it was just a matter of, all right, which one ends up winning out based on the strength of the storm. Helene ended up being on the stronger side, so it favored more that Florida track. Models right now are kind of just a spaghetti plot. There is no spaghetti plot for this yet because there isn't anything to track. The spaghetti plot for this would be useless because it would show something kind of moving into the Gulf and then just kind of meandering for a while before getting pushed off toward Florida and out into the Atlantic.
This is more of a bowl of oatmeal than a bowl of spaghetti.
This is the, yes. No, it's still a bowl of spaghetti. It's
just
not,
it is, okay. It just doesn't have any direction.
You just haven't straightened the noodles out. This is just, you threw all the noodles in the bowl.
I would prefer us not to straighten the noodles out.
I agree. But this is going to be one of those where it's not going to be a really well-defined track per se. It's going to be something kind of meanders in the Gulf, just sits there for a few days, and then gets shipped off toward Florida and out into the Atlantic.
And is it too early to even know what the timeline of that could be?
Kind of, but we're kind of getting a little bit closer to when we could start to see that. And I'm going to switch over to our GFS model here. And I've highlighted two of the areas that we're kind of watching, that the models have been struggling on which one of these actually wins out. So it's kind of two different waves. One over the Bay of Campeche and one that is still out kind of the Western Caribbean. We'll be watching these through the end of the week. By Friday, we should see that little wave, or more so into Saturday, see that wave moving from the Caribbean into the Gulf. Then the one out in the Bay of Campeche just kind of sits there. It's still kind of a question as to which one of these actually wins out. So I kind of merge them together and just show one broad tropical wave. Notice by the time this even quote unquote tries to get organized by Monday of next week, we have a cold front moving in. That's going to start pushing all of this moisture back down to the south and hopefully kind of push whatever broad circulation there is either farther south into the Gulf, maybe back into the Caribbean, or kind of exiting and moving out into the Atlantic. But this is working into our favor with that cold front on the way. Another aspect or impact or I don't know what word I'm looking for here. Another factor, that's the one I'm looking for, that is working in our favor is strong wind shear. I'm starting this graphic on Friday. The reds to yellows are strong wind shear. There's going to be incredible wind shear, not only over Louisiana and all the northern Gulf, but even diving into the central part of the Gulf, which is why the models have not been aggressive at all with developing this into anything. Even in the early stages with Helene, we had kind of said all options are on the table because there were models going high-end major hurricane. None of the models are doing that with this. This is borderline depression, maybe a storm at the worst, but again, everything kind of working into our favor where it would be a struggle to really organize in the Gulf, and all of the factors in our favor would keep this for the most part away from us.
And like you said, it's kind of like holding your breath until, well, we have 13 more days. 12 more days.
Yeah, it is.
Hopefully.
And even these forecasts now with the models kind of sniffing out something in advance is one of those, don't hold your breath because you're going to be waiting a while for something to even happen, if at all. So it's good and
anxiety building,
it is.
truly,
It's good
to
and
know
bad.
that
It's
far
you know,
out.
and there are discussions in both sides of the the coin that it's giving folks that huge lead time, that heads up. However, until something actually forms,
what's the purpose in having
what
a
is
heads
the
up
purpose
that
if
far
nothing
out?
actually happens? But it just it puts it, pardon the pun, on the radar for you to, all right, this is something we need to watch in kind of roughly this timeline, that maybe by the weekend, early next week, we're watching something, but really by Sunday, Monday, if this thing does try and organize, we'll already have had a cold front move through. And that's what we're really, by October, we're praying for those cold fronts to start rolling down, because
For so many reasons.
once that pattern starts, that usually is kind of the end for our hurricane season. And actually looking at the long range models, there do appear to be more fronts on the horizon as we continue through October.
Okay. That really,
So
it made me feel better in this discussion. I hope it made all of you feel better.
Hopefully that alleviated the fears. We will see some rainfall kind of unassociated tomorrow, Friday into Saturday. And even the rainfall totals, I don't know if I have that graphic up there. Yeah, now I do. We're not talking about huge totals for us, probably a little bit more so down the bayou and coastal parishes, 2 to 3, maybe plus inches of rainfall. Bulk of the heavy rain, that 5 to 7 plus, of maybe even 10 inches, that's all staying well offshore. So we're not even, with our days of rainfall coming up here, we're also not talking about just a constant deluge. We'll have breaks in the rainfall and not any kind of excessive totals that would lead to flooding.
All right. Well, Chris?
Hopefully that alleviated all fears.
I think it certainly did. Well, we're going to talk again at 7 o'clock.
Yes, we'll have another new model
all
runs will have come out. We'll see if the consistency is still there. I would expect to say that it will be, as nothing in the overall pattern, which is favoring a more hostile environment in the Gulf, has really changed. And usually it's easier to kind of get a sample of the surrounding environment as opposed to anything in a developing tropical system. So once we kind of know the upper steering patterns and the upper atmosphere and the upper environment, that usually lends us a little bit more credence to, we think we know where it's going to go, and we kind of have a rough idea of a kind of the ceiling on its strength.
All right. Chris, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We're going to head out now to Amelia Strahan, who is covering some breaking news for us in the Lower Garden District. There is a massive fire on Magazine Street there. Amelia, what can you tell us? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so the smoke is, you can see it, it's barreling off the top of these buildings, and it's just filling the street. You can't really even see past this next block on Magazine. We're told that it was a 4 residential structures caught fire. And the flames are so large, they're actually expecting to fight these all through the night. That's coming from the fire chief. There are 72 personnel on site right now, 25 units. And a mic trouble here. I don't know if you guys can hear me. The mic is, I think it's on. Like I said before, the smoke is just barreling off of the top of this building, filling the streets. We are standing next to actually a few families that fled the building, and one family lives right next door, and they were watching the smoke and watching the flames to see if they were crawling closer and closer to their building. As of right now, the last we heard from the fire chief, though, is it is contained to 4 residential structures, but you know how close those buildings are in New Orleans, especially in this area, Lower Garden. I mean, look at that. It's just can't see anything down Magazine. Like I said, right now we know that it's 4 structures, but you know, fire does spread quickly. So families around here they're trying to get out of these apartments. We talked to one woman who her son actually had to grab his cat and run because the smoke was surrounding him. So right now we've heard that there are no injuries reported, which of course is always good news. We don't know what caused this fire at this point. He said the investigation will be ongoing, you know, with them just monitoring this fire and through the night. I would assume we might be a little while until we get some answers. That call came in at 1:49 and NOFD was right on it. They were dispatched at 1:50. So still a lot that we don't know about this fire, but of course we're speaking to residents and the officials here on the scene, and we will keep you guys updated as we have more information. Reporting live from Magazine, Amelia Strahan, WWL Louisiana.
Thank you so much. Again, just to recap what Amelia said, this is on Magazine Street, right near Orange Street, about an hour and a half long now. The firefighters have been on scene there, fighting a fire at 4 homes. She says dozens of firefighters are on scene, but so far no reported injuries. We will, of course, have an update on this breaking news coming up tonight on the WWL Louisiana News at 5 and 6. We'll be back here on WWL Plus for an update on the weather at 7. And remember, you can always stream our newscasts on WWL Plus. You'll also get the latest breaking news, weather forecasts, and up-to-date information on the tropics. And you can watch us on Fire TV, Roku, Apple TV, and on our WWL mobile app.
This has been breaking news from WWL Louisiana.